those who are eligible for the vaccination programme are now being advised to book their appointments with the GPs or at a pharmacy ahead of the flu season. We talk about this every year, obviously.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, and I'm going to use another big word now. Presumably, it's especially important for those who are immunocompromised to have their flu vaccine.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the second time she's used that word today. She used it earlier on in order to
I
try to
know.
impress me, and actually succeeded in doing so.
So now I'm impressing
and
everyone.
She's now pronounced it right, so I'm really delighted.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
It is slightly different this year to how it's been previously. There are actually 3 different types of flu vaccine that we're giving to 3 different age groups, and that's partly because of research that has shown that young people are a little bit more susceptible to a particular type of flu that we think is in the area or coming over. There's always a little bit of guesswork. You'll remember in that the nasty thing about flu virus, although it's very clever, is that it's able to change itself very slightly from year to year, and so we have to keep modifying our defence mechanisms each time, and we're always just trying to get ahead of the game a little bit, and there's a huge sort of worldwide industry in trying to predict what the next flu will be. I have to say I'm not a great expert on the over 65s thing, although I do understand that the way that the vaccine has been combined in that particular vaccine just makes it work for them better in terms of defending them against the particular flu viruses that they are likely to be susceptible to. Look, the reality is that if you have the flu jab, it is very likely to be able to prevent the vast majority of the flu viruses that are likely to come our way. Now, it's always a bit difficult because sometimes, of course, A, living on an island, and B, being well defended, we don't have large flu epidemics a lot of the time. But of course, there have been some years where that's not been the case, and it's a just-in-case thing, isn't it, really? If we happen to have a large flu epidemic in the UK, it is very likely that it would spread across here. And for those who are particularly vulnerable, so the immunocompromised, quite right, Beth, those who are elderly, those who have weak immune systems for lots of different reasons, really. They might be on particular medication that suppresses their immune system. They might have particular problems with diabetes or lung disease or heart disease, all of which will just make you a little bit more vulnerable. It's incredibly important that you get protected, because one dose of flu can actually make you severely ill or can kill you, and undoubtedly thousands of people every year do die through flu, and that's generally in the elderly age group, but not solely.
I've got a question for you, because my father had his flu jab last week, and he pretty much immediately on the back of it got a really bad cough and cold.
Yeah.
Now, he said that he's also spoken to some other people, friends of his, who got a similar sort of thing. Is that genuinely linked to the flu jab, or is it just coincidence?
No. There are 2 factors. One is that you have the flu jab at a time when there are a lot of viruses floating around. We've just talked about that. This is a peaked sort of little blip in the post back to school era where there's just a lot of people spreading viruses around. What most people get, if they're going to get anything following the flu jab, is not flu. That's a really important thing to say. A lot of people come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm not having the flu jab because I had a flu jab last year and I got flu 2 weeks later." It's very unlikely that you would get flu. The problem is that a lot of cold and other upper respiratory viruses feel like flu. And in fact, we call it flu-like illness. It's a big general diagnosis that we use in people who have a nasty upper respiratory tract infection. So that sounds as if that's what your dad had. And so it's partly because there are just more viruses around and you might catch them. Partly because when you stimulate the immune system, just for a little moment, it makes you, or a little day or two, it makes you a little bit more vulnerable because your immune system is fighting that virus which you've just put in order to build itself up for when the real virus comes along. And so in theory, anyway, it can make you just a little bit more vulnerable if a virus comes along and you happen to pick it up.
In the UK, I understand that they are offering free flu vaccines to under 5s. What's the situation over here?
It's not the situation over here. And in fact, we've had a couple of people come in and mums and say, "Please, can I have a flu jab?" Unfortunately, the Manx government are not, as far as I'm aware, funding that at the moment. We may now get lots of phone calls from ministers and so forth, but my understanding is that it's not being provided free on the Isle of Man. So just watch that. You can pay for it always privately. It's not massively expensive. You may decide that's something you want to invest in for your child.
How susceptible are children of that age to getting flu?
Again, very much depends on otherwise the state of health generally, really. I mean, if they are asthmatic or it's been prone to a lot of infections, or if they are having other medication for other things. If they're diabetic, of course, they're going to be slightly more vulnerable. The vast majority of children are actually pretty good at defending themselves.
Leona has sent a message to say, I've had really bad flu for the past 3 years running. I don't have any conditions that would make me eligible for a free flu vaccine, but would it be worth me paying to have one?
That very much depends on whether what you mean by flu is actually influenza or whether it is the flu-like illness. The problem is that you can be vaccinated against the flu and still get flu in the general sense of the word, in the sense that you would have all of the symptoms of influenza. The problem is that most people who have ever had influenza will tell you that it's very different to flu-like illness, and can be very much more serious. So if this lady has genuinely had influenza and has been proven to have that, and you can have virology done, tests done to see whether you've actually got flu, then if she is particularly susceptible, then it might be worthwhile. If it's not been proven as flu, I would suspect it hasn't been. If you've lived on the Isle of Man for the last 3 winters, we have not had any significant influenza on the island. Of course, there have been the isolated case, but there has been no epidemics as far as I've been aware.